All right, so this was obviously going to be a couple of things because the main thing we were going to do was the South Park movie. And you had mentioned like a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago that you had just watched the Beavis and Butthead movie again, which for some reason, I also had around that time.
Mm.
And it was like you wanted to do that also. And I had thought about this one because the original plan was South Park and Team America. But we were like, there's so much like touchy stuff in Team America.
I wish
But
Team America was made now.
yeah, because we're not entirely ruling out Team America ever. It's just we'll have to think about how we want to approach it more.
It's just
but
not
in
it's not the right time.
but I figured in the
Maybe
meantime,
once sanity reigns again, then we can look at it.
but I figured the Beavis and Butthead movie is just as appropriate because it's the idea of more or less adult targeted um, like animated shows coming to the big screen from in kind of the late 90s area, with Beavis and Butthead being I think 96 and the South Park movie came in right in 1999.
I think what's interesting too about both of these movies is neither one has a sequel. South Park has more video games than movies
Yeah,
by
I was
quite a
thinking
wide margin.
yeah, I was thinking I heard something about Trey Parker and Matt Stone like hitting around ideas for another movie, but nothing's really like taken off yet.
I feel like Borat beat him to it.
Yeah. Yeah, because if there's one thing South Park is great at, it's current events.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I don't think they were always that way, were they? There was kind of a transition at one point where they kind of became like the current events show.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and
I've heard they have an episode about COVID locked and ready to go.
that I was thinking it might already be out there, wasn't it like really recent, or maybe I'm thinking of something else.
Maybe they did release it. I don't know.
But yeah, because I only catch up with the show occasionally because there's just so much of it.
Yeah.
But that's the
And
thing,
I
it
won't
only
lie, I kind of would love to see a Beavis and Butthead take on the coronavirus.
and I feel like it'd be easy because they don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like sitting in front of the TV is their thing. But at the same time, if they were to wander around town like they often do, they'd be like, it'd almost be like the beginning of Shaun of the Dead. Like they wouldn't notice.
I would love to see the movie end similar in fashion to the first one, where it's a meeting with Joe Biden and they're hailed as heroes because they're the only people that didn't leave their house.
Yeah. And I was trying to remember, do you, I guess for either one, do you remember the first time you saw either show?
No.
I don't remember Beavis and Butthead, but I remember the first time I saw South Park. Because South Park was always kind of this, it seemed like this forbidden thing where I knew it was not that we were told not to watch it, but I just kind of hadn't, but I had heard that it was like dirty and foul mouthed and stuff like that. Which obviously in the 90s, it was like for kids our age at the time, it was a very fascinating thing that there was a cartoon that was like adult themed.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Which
was,
is funny because it's not the first time that's happened. That just happened to be the most popular.
yeah. Yeah, I was well over a decade away from seeing Fritz the Cat for the first time when I saw when I saw South Park for the first time. But the two episodes that I saw first were I can't remember exactly what was going on. They were trapped on a bus and there was like a monster outside, and one of the kids ended up getting killed. And then the second
And it
episode I
wasn't
saw,
Kenny.
and I think he died eventually, but I don't think he was the kid that died first,
Mm-hmm.
weirdly enough. But the second episode was a much more well-known episode, which is the one where the Nambla episode.
Mm-hmm.
The one where Kenny's dad keeps getting fucked up. Like that was the second episode I ever saw of South Park, and it was like, yeah, I could probably get into this.
I do remember that was one of the first episodes we watched. because it's so funny now because I feel like it's so tame by South Park standards. But I remember you and I had no idea really what we were getting into until the John Denver Experience ride. And then we were like, oh, this is that kind of show.
I forgot about that until you just mentioned it. Yeah, because that's where his nosebleed comes from, isn't it?
I think so. I just love the announcer guy.
Yeah. It's weird how vivid the memory of that episode is now that you bring up certain aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember the first episode of Beavis and Butthead I saw, but I just remember I loved I never knew exactly when it was on, so it was always like finding the Holy Grail when I would go to MTV to see if it was there.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is that maybe this is a child mind thing, or maybe this was real. I don't know. Either is believable, but it felt like the ads on MTV, like the commercial breaks, were an eternity. Like I felt
Mm-hmm.
like when Beavis and Butthead was on MTV, there was barely show. It was like 90% commercials.
Well, that and you throw in the music videos.
Yeah, the music videos were an aspect that I didn't appreciate till later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And they were basically Mystery Science Theater for music videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought they brought that back in a really good way when when he did that reboot in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
They watched music videos, but they also watched like the shitty MTV reality shows. Thought that was really good. I was kind of hoping that reboot would go on a little longer because he really brought it back. But yeah,
I would love, especially for this time period, I also wouldn't mind watching them riff on the news.
yeah. So should we get into the movies themselves now?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. As I mentioned before, we turn the cameras on.
I just had the image of them flipping channels and seeing footage of a protest and Butthead just going, whoa, when somebody gets shot with a rubber bullet.
Oh god. We really shouldn't laugh at that,
But you're imagining it now, aren't you?
only because you dragged Butthead into this. So before we started, I said that even though the Beavis and Butthead movie came first, I figured we'd start with South Park because it's kind of I felt like it was kind of a bigger thing. So it's talking about it going big because obviously there's the thing where you have to translate from the small screen to the big screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to take the approach.
Which typically, what percentage would you put that that's a fruitful endeavor? Would you put it at 40?
It's a small number.
Mm-hmm. Like I
It's
know,
a really small number.
I lately have been watching Community, and Dan Harmon keeps dropping hints about a movie, and it's like it's a fun idea, but seeing how that usually turns out, I don't know if I want it to go there.
Yeah, because lately movies based on TV shows are more like they just are released on the same streaming platform that the show is currently on. It's like it almost feels like we're kind of past a point that those kind of things get theatrically released.
Now there have been times where the movie following the TV show has turned out fine. I feel like Veronica Mars is one of those examples.
Yeah. But South Park took things in another direction as far as making it seem bigger, like because there's a whole thing where you have to warrant the big screen experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you just do an episode of the show, only it's like an hour and a half, then it's like, all right. So the idea of going bigger, which South Park does in many ways,
And even puts it in its title.
yeah. But the idea of it being a musical, first and foremost, I only remember that it was a really big deal that there was a movie that had been made, and even I would have only been like 7 or 8 at the time, but I remember specifically like the people.
It
What's
was
that?
early too.
Yeah.
Like really early considering where they are now.
Yeah, because they only got like really big in like syndication in what, 97 or something.
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
And the only thing I remember from speaking of how they got into syndication, the George Clooney cameo.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only thing I really remember from the TV spots was the we accidentally replaced your art with a baked potato line.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything about the advertising that suggested it was a musical?
No.
Because I don't remember being prepared for that. mean, when you look at their past and future, you expect it now because they got started with Cannibal the musical, and now they're Tony winners for the Book of
Mm-hmm.
Mormon. But it's like I can't remember if people knew that going in or not, and it's like it's one of those things where it's kind of amazing in retrospect that it works.
It is. And then like you look at back on it now and it's like, well, of course it worked. That's their wheelhouse.
And what's also really interesting is you think about the fact that Isaac Hayes plays Chef. And he's had musical moments on the show for like the prostitute song and the
Chocolate
chocolate
salty
salty
balls.
balls song. Isaac Hayes doesn't get a song in the movie, does he?
If I remember right, no.
Well, he kind of starts the reprise in the very last scene right before it ends. But other than that,
Mm-hmm.
how interesting is that? But yeah, but still, also the ways they just kind of made it seem like bigger, like Kenny's descent into hell is something they probably would have never had the budget for show wise.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because like the whole appeal of the show is how low budget it looks.
Mm-hmm.
And how they never really, because usually when animated movies go from show to movie, the animation gets polished at some point in between.
Are you thinking of the SpongeBob movie?
There's that, and I don't know if I ever saw the movie, but I was thinking the Powerpuff Girls movie probably went the same route also.
I feel like Rugrats' movie animation looked different too.
Yeah, but it's like the movie animation wise looks like the show,
Mm-hmm.
which is really fun. That's why I much preferred the second SpongeBob movie to the first one. Was the animation looked the same for the most part.
Yeah, if Comedy Central decided to air the movie and you were just flipping channels, you'd never know. Just by
And
sight.
they even make a joke about it at the very beginning of the movie when Cartman says, "Yeah, but the animation's all crappy," and then there's just that shot of them walking from the side.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a moment I love where it's like they didn't polish up the animation at all. Was the moment when right before Terrence and Phillip are about to get electrocuted,
Mm-hmm.
and Sheila says, "Any last words?" and Phillip leans over and says, "How about get me the fuck out of this chair?" It's funny that he's saying that in that moment because if you look, there's a glitch in the animation and his arm comes out of the restraint. And it's like,
Well,
I don't think
also,
that wasn't intended, but I love like the charm of it being there.
and there's also the fact that Saddam Hussein's not even animated.
Yeah.
Like they took a picture out of a book and just made half of his head go up and down.
And that really bizarre when they put that stuff in there, they're like how some of the signs in the cafeteria are also like regular looking pictures.
Mm-hmm.
But I've gotten the internet connection thing twice now. Are we good
Yeah,
visual wise?
seemed to be.
So as far as did you think this was also? Obviously we talked recently about how long meta has been around.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever kind of take a correlation between like the sort of meta nature of the Terrence and Phillip movie? Kind of, it's almost like they were trying to predict what could have possibly happened by releasing a South Park movie into the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because there's because I think there's a really great moment, especially that kind of brings out that sort of meta nature where it's like, obviously one of the big advertising points of a South Park movie theatrically released is nothing's going to get beeped out. They can say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So when I want to say the first time when they go see Ashes of Fire is the first uncensored word we hear is Philip saying, or Terrence saying, "You're such a pig fucker" to Philip,
Mm-hmm.
and they gasp and they can't believe they just heard that because they're used to watching Terrence and Philip on regular TV. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like the fact that that's also the first time we hear "fuck" in the South Park movie. We're having like simultaneous reactions to as they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's something really clever about that. how it's like mirroring itself. And I think that kind of keeps going through the whole thing, where it's when they come out of the theater and they go back to school,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like local celebrities to their fellow students because they saw the Terrence and Phillip movie. And it's like I remember that being the case. Like, I'm sure if I had been in like a higher grade at the time this came out, that would have been the case for this movie. But it was like I remember like Bad Santa being that movie when I was in junior high.
Mm-hmm.
Where like it was basically the case of when Cartman says, "I saw the Terrence and Phillip movie. Who wants to touch me?"
I just had a random thought too,
What's
and
that?
it's gone. I had to pull a big boy crease there. If it comes
So
back, I'll bring it up.
was it on this topic or a separate one?
Oh, I remember now. So something that the SpongeBob movie did that I wish the South Park movie would have done. You know how we find out it's kind of like an origin kind of thing. We find out Antonio Banderas' pirate is the one that is the pirate from the SpongeBob opening. I would like to have seen an origin of the dude with the banjo that sings the theme to South Park.
Yeah, who the fuck is that?
I would love to have known that.
Maybe he's in the war scenes and we just didn't see him.
Maybe.
Because I feel like the war scenes is a Where's Waldo scene of background characters that they didn't have time to put in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You especially get a look at them when, like I was talking about during the reprise, when the song starts at the end. We see some characters that we recognize from the show that weren't in the movie yet.
Yeah, because Ned's in there, and is it Jimbo, the guy with the orange hat?
Yes.
And then I'm pretty sure Barbara's in there.
Yeah. And also talking about how young we were when this movie came out. Was this movie? Obviously, you're 4 years older than me, but was this movie as educational for you as it was for me? there were
Not really by that point.
there were some new terms to me when I first saw this. Some of which were helpfully explained, like Sheila asking what a rim job is, to which Cartman's mom immediately knows. I remember when Mr. Mackey says one of the quotes from the Terrence and Phillip movie is "Eat penguin shit, you ass spelunker."
Mm-hmm.
Like 2 years later in school, I learned what spelunking was, and then I was like, "Oh, that's hilarious."
I feel like that's one of the highlights of the movie is watching Mr. Mackey quote it. Because I love just how matter-of-factly Mr. Mackey sits in the room and just starts spewing the lines that they're saying.
And the fact that
Mr.
his
Mackey's
song
delivery, if
completely
anything, is just gold. Mr. Mackey's also one of my favorite characters to see from the side.
I love how it's a running joke of what their profile shots look like. I like the little detail of whenever we see Cartman from the side, you can see how his gut hangs off of like his belt line.
Mm-hmm. It's funny
Especially in the lunch line when he's
for a
wearing.
show that's so poorly animated. It's a very funny little detail.
Yeah, because it's the whole idea of white shirts not being slimming.
Mm-hmm.
Like if anything, they're the opposite. And it's like it's when he's wearing his white Terrence and Phillip shirt that really shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if that detail was intentional, but if it was, that's a really precise detail. Oh yeah, there was also the whole idea of this movie would have been the first time. This is awkward talking about, especially with you for some reason, and the fact that people will see this. I'm pretty sure this movie was the first time I ever heard the word clitoris. So there was that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's like I said, it's a lot of life was piecing together the jokes in this movie, like for the next like 3 to 5 years after I saw it.
You were talking about the songs earlier too, and them being Tony Award winners. Don't forget, this movie has an Oscar nomination for a song too.
Yes, and that is before. But well, yeah, we'll go into that, and then I'll ask you this question. Obviously, when songs are nominated at the Oscars, they're performed live during the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen the video of Blame Canada being performed?
No,
It's glorious. Do you
of
know who?
course it is. It was Robin Williams.
Yes.
That's the only
and it's
person that could have done that.
and it's one of those things where we can laugh about it, like it's funny that Blame Canada was nominated, but it's a really smart and clever song.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you really dissect the lyrics, it's not exactly subtle. Like it's pretty out front about what it's describing, but the way in like the way it uses song to do it,
Mm-hmm.
like the last line of the song pretty much says everything you need to know about people's motives in like when you hear about people being outraged.
The
Where
movie
the
was very prophetic in that way. Like, tell
yeah
me Kyle's mom isn't a Karen.
yeah it would have been even more prophetic if that was already her name.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that I actually, whenever I see a lot of outrage, and let's not get way too ahead and say like, some of these people that get too into it and say like all outrage is this kind of outrage. There's some that's warranted for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever I see like the manufactured outrage, that last line of the song that says, we must blame them and cause a fuss before somebody thinks of blaming us,
Mm-hmm.
is like, that's such a brilliant line.
Mm-hmm. It's a
Because that's
very it's a very self-aware line that I don't think enough Americans notice is self-referential.
yeah, you see that so much today too. There'll be people that like say things and have no idea whatsoever how blatantly they're describing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and Blame Canada is like that's the core of that song.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we can laugh at stuff like Carmen's mom saying that bitch Anne Murray too and stuff like that. But God, it's a really smart song. And the question I was going to ask you was, and oh, before we go to that, also, the way that carries over into the plot of the movie, and how
Mm-hmm.
there's like the stuff like when they're burning all the Terrence and Phillips stuff, or the Alanis, that kid there, sort of like that. And it's like how we can see where especially younger people are influenced to hate the way that they end up doing it later in life.
Mm-hmm. Plus, with the burning of the Terrence Phillips dolls, you're kind of it's prophetic again because there's kind of those shifts into like there's some kind of fascist overtones going on there or undertones.
Yeah. So the thing I was going to ask you before we went into Blame Canada was, do you have a favorite song in the movie?
I don't know, Uncle Fucker's catchy as hell. I would love to have seen that on the Oscar ballot.
It did win the MTV Movie Award for Best Song. So
Yeah, but there's a difference in seeing it on that ballot versus seeing it on an Oscar ballot. Like, I
yeah,
want to see like Meryl Streep and Denzel Washington and Jack Nicholson and all these people looking at it and going, I wonder if I liked Uncle Fucker better than, especially if, I don't know why, but I want to see Tom Hanks make that decision. I want to see Tom Hanks reason with himself and be like, Uncle Fucker's good, but
like having a real serious discussion with himself about it,
yeah.
because he
And I
did.
want, and I don't know why, but I want it to drive him insane in a Ray Peterson way.
For the uninitiated, that'd be his character in The Burbs.
I wish Tom Hanks would do another movie like The Burbs. He's so fucking funny.
Yeah, I would say my favorite song as far as like in that way, because I love your answer.
Hmm.
But as far as like actually the way it sounds, I feel like I'm kind of a sucker for that moment in a lot of musicals where one song starts and then it like goes into like a medley of all the songs we've heard before it.
Hmm.
So I've always been a huge fan of the Law Resistance song.
Yeah. And what's funny, I think what gets lost too is the song that the movie opens on is a very nice song.
Yeah.
And
It's full
I don't know
purpose.
about you, but when I was in school, the one that people seemed to sing the most was Kyle's Mom's Bitch.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the thing where there, because I love how there's songs that are like genuinely good,
Hmm.
but they're all also funny. Like there's never a full-on serious song. It's like what another song that can be seen as really funny that's like that I keep forgetting how good it is the song that Satan sings.
Hmm.
Even though it's hilarious when he breaks into the high pitch at the
And I love how the songs are all so theatrical in the way they're presented, but we save the biggest theatrical song, of course, for Big Gay Al.
Of course.
Big Gay Al is full on Ralphie Parker fantasy theatrical.
I love how he and Winona Ryder are the two main draws of this USO show.
Hmm.
But yeah, going back to Kyle's mom, there, the song,
Hmm.
um, that is another case of as far as South Park touching on like offensive territory.
Hmm.
And it's like when you get, and it's a funny song, and then it's like because the whole thing was how shocking the movie was at the time.
Hmm.
And when he gets to the point where he goes all around the world, which literally just ends with him in blackface.
See, I feel like the way society views things, if it would have come out later, South Park could have killed Tropic Thunder before Tropic Thunder ever got off the ground.
Yeah, because what I was thinking was something with Tropic Thunder and with stuff like this, with a lot of stuff that's on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Also, a lot of people like to say you couldn't make that kind of thing now, but South Park is still doing it,
Hmm.
and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is still doing it.
Hmm.
So it's like so it's like there's things where it's almost like this. You would think it'd almost be like this sort of underground thing of, oh, these are the shows that can still do it, but South Park and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia are two of the biggest shows on now.
And I think that's why they continue to do it, because I think their attitude is fine. If you're offended, don't watch, because there's a ton of other people that will.
But you know, another reason I think they can get away with it is because they're so fucking smart about it.
Hmm.
Like they're not doing it to do it.
Hmm.
There's always something. It's the writing and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia still blows my mind.
I told you you would enjoy it.
I know. I'm about to start season 11 and I'm fully committed. And yeah, and the fact that South Park is still going strong as well,
Hmm.
and it's been around since the mid 90s.
Hmm.
It's like you can still do that stuff. You just have to be smart about it and clever in
Hmm.
the way that this is. And it's like the fact that there are some cases, like Team America, for instance, got a lot of criticism because a lot of people did feel like Team America was doing it just to do it, which we can argue whenever we do that video. But yeah, just the way it's approached, where like everything, it almost feels like a cop out to use the term satire sometimes.
Hmm.
But I mean, there's so many, when you look at the entire movie and what it's saying, everything we're looking at is satire in some way
Hmm.
about itself or other things.
Which is funny that we're comparing it with Beavis and Butthead, because feel like Beavis and Butthead is exactly the opposite. It's literally just telling a story in that universe.
I have heard theories that the reason Mike Judge, can't remember if he's ever said this personally, but I've heard like people analyze it and say that, you know, Mike, like how Mike Judge, we're kind of getting into Beavis and Butthead territory, but since it's versus, we can go back and forth. Remember Mike Judge made Idiocracy.
Mm-hmm.
And Idiocracy is like a scathing look at the idiots in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, when Mike Judge created Beavis and Butthead, it was basically like an early version of him showing the way he viewed those kind of people, like he does in Idiocracy. It's just like, this is the youth of the 90s, is Beavis and Butthead. And it's like, look how fucking stupid it is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, is being able to say that and make it hilarious is where the talent comes in.
Now that you mention it, I have heard older people say that they feel like the Beavis and Butthead is a perfect depiction of millennials. Which it's not, but whatever.
Yeah. There's also something in the South Park movie that we don't get much, if at all, in the show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's celebrity voices. Because if I remember correctly, no celebrity voices themselves, first off.
As is tradition.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, there have been a ton of celebrities that have offered and really want to do that, but they just don't like to do that. I don't know if they think it would take away from like the parody of it or what, but then when you look,
it makes it. I think that what it is it makes a joke like this. How do I put this? It makes a joke less funny when the person that you're making fun of is in on it.
yeah, to a degree. Sometimes it works perfectly, like James Woods on Family Guy.
Mm-hmm.
But the way Seth MacFarlane makes those jokes and the way South Park makes those jokes are two totally different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, one of the best examples of that, going back to Family Guy, Adam West is a great example of that too.
Yeah. Because we've got Brent Spiner doing Conan.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. This is almost as good as bringing Sean Penn into Angry Birds just to grunt without ever saying a line. Do you remember who voices Brooke Shields?
No.
Minnie Driver.
Mm.
Minnie Driver, fresh off her Oscar nomination for Good Will Hunting. And her only line is, "I farted once on the set of Blue Lagoon."
With which she's met with a slap.
I don't know what's funnier, the slap or the pause in between. And we've got another one of my personal favorites.
I love that the slap doesn't come with words.
Or a reaction.
It's just understood why that happened.
Another one of my personal favorites is Dave Foley as the Baldwins.
Mm-hmm.
I love that he's all of them. And Daniel was spared because he's the outcast.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric Idle as the doctor.
I love that the Arquettes were taken out off screen.
How perfect is that scene too? The propaganda parody. It's like it's a parody, but it's also a little too spot on. Like it's scarily accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I love the oh, did I say death camps? I meant happy camps. And then it's the they have the finest meals, and it's just like slop on a tray and fabulous doctors, and they're getting like their teeth pulled. For some reason, this is my favorite. And regular exercise, and they're just digging.
Let's not also gloss over the fact that, as far as being prophetic, the whole Operation Human Shield thing.
Oh God. And that's the thing too, is there's just a full-on disclaimer here of we're laughing at stuff that we shouldn't be laughing at. But I feel the need to not have to say that over and over again, because if whoever's watching this saw a video about the South Park movie and they clicked on it, surely they know that this is South Park in a nutshell, is laughing when you're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you are laughing at when you're supposed to because you laugh at things that are funny. And the show is and the movie are undeniably hilarious because of the way they approach these things that are otherwise taboo.
I feel like South Park's main thing is they excel at making light of dark situations.
Yeah. And that's another thing you can chalk up to the fact that they're still going.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they're still going, and I don't know, because like you look at The Simpsons, that's been around since what, 89?
Mm-hmm.
And every time I hear about The Simpsons, I've never watched The Simpsons, but I often hear that it lost its quality a long time ago.
How many times do you hear that about shows that are only 4 or 5 seasons in?
Yeah. And the fact that South Park only gets stronger because of the way they decided to approach the things that are happening now,
Mm-hmm.
and can do that in a community fashion. Not only that, but something I recommended to you a while back was that documentary 6 Days to Air.
Mm-hmm.
We get to see them. They have, as far as this documentary goes, they have no idea what they're going to do for a show 6 days before Comedy Central airs it.
Mm-hmm.
They start
I think
fresh.
what also helps too is it's not a lot of it is based on current events, but there's also a lot of just random adventures thrown in.
Yeah. I don't know if they're still doing this, but the structure I always noticed was every episode had 2 stories going on
Mm-hmm.
that somehow eventually converged. And it's another one of those cases where I haven't watched it regularly in forever. But whenever I catch reruns of it, I often ask myself, why don't I watch this more? And then I mean, there are some things that go like way, and you can chalk this up to the movie too. There are some things that go way forward, especially in like the gross out camp.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like somebody like me that can't handle puking. The show can sometimes be a nightmare for me. Like at least in the movie, I know when it's coming because it's whenever Wendy's around.
I mean, there's a lot of weird ass imagery on the show as well. Like, I remember I was flipping channels one day and I stopped on an episode of South Park, and the part that I stopped on had Britney Spears, but Britney Spears' head from the mouth up was just blown off,
Yeah, I remember that.
and she
It's really
spends like half the episode that way.
yeah. There's nightmarish shit.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Like it's, and here's the thing: is we're talking about this, and it's like this is a show where one of its main running jokes is one of the kids dies regularly.
I'm also a fan of the running joke that one of the big monsters that runs through the town has Patrick Duffy for a leg.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Speaking of Kenny, another thing that I tend to associate with this movie and the fact that you've got to make it a big deal if it's going to get a theatrical release.
Mm-hmm.
The fact, do you remember how much the buildup was that we saw Kenny's face in it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if this came out today, how many months before the movie came out would that image have been spoiled?
Yeah.
We would have known like months before the movie even came out what Kenny looked like.
And I love the payoff that he just looks completely normal.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, for some reason, even though he sounds like the others also, it's Mike Judge doing his voice when he speaks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only 2 words, but it's...
So I have a question for you. Do you remember back in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, when Chuck Norris facts were all the rage?
Yeah.
Do you feel like the genesis of that might have been the Brian Boitano song?
It does feel like a blueprint for it.
Mm-hmm. And I love the random appearance of Brian Dennehy.
Yeah, and it looks like I love how there's sometimes where the South Park celebrities look exactly like their person, and there's sometimes where they look nothing like the person.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Dennehy falls into the latter. But yet that's so funny too. Like it's
I love
like
that I think the only person, and I could be wrong because there's a lot of episodes I haven't seen, but I'm pretty sure the only person that gets the treatment of using an actual picture of them is Saddam Hussein.
Oh man, I'm almost positive there's another example, and I can't think of who it is. But another one that always comes to mind is when Trey Parker was nominated for the Oscar for Blame Canada, he lost to Phil Collins' song from Tarzan.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've heard this in interviews, but Trey Parker hates the fact that he lost the Oscar to Phil Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think he hates that he. It doesn't really. I don't know if it mattered to him completely if he won or not. It was the fact that he lost to Phil Collins.
If I remember right, I think shortly after that happened, there was an episode where Phil Collins is in it, and I don't remember if he's just an asshole or if I don't remember.
He's in like this may have been more than one episode, but the one I remember, he's in like a group of celebrities, and the way that you can tell it's him is because he's holding his Oscar the whole time. So now a lot of people
It's
are
just
saying
funny
that
how you and I used to joke about people like holding their Oscars while they're doing things, and now we've seen that joke several times. South Park did it. Steven Spielberg and Goldmember is a great example of it. And then Dane Cook references Halle Berry clutching her Oscar while she poops.
and that's the thing. That's the thing too is the main reason Trey Parker probably wants that Oscar.
Is that the only thing he's missing for an EGOT?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes, I think they've got a shitload of Emmys for the show for South Park.
Mm-hmm. Golden Globes too, I'd imagine.
And a lot of people are saying if they just adapt Book of Mormon into a movie and he makes one more original song for it, he might very well have it.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy that Book of Mormon's not a movie yet.
Yeah,
But
but is it kind of one of those movies though that if they make a movie out of it, it might almost taint it?
I have no idea. I know nothing about Book of Mormon except that Josh Gad was the star of it. That's all I know.
The only thing I know about it is that it's great, from what I've been told.
Yeah, the night they won the Tony, they won like Tonys all night, I think.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it's very funny.
And they were saying like also you can tell that Trey Parker takes musicals very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Cannibal and this and Book of Mormon and Acid and Went and Drag just as a joke. But when Book of Mormon won the big Tony, when he's giving his speech, he's almost crying.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell how much musicals like really mean something to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a good transition for the stuff that the South Park movie does handle seriously, at least as seriously as it can.
Mm-hmm.
The real like main emotional factor here seems to be like the relationship between Kyle and his mom is taken pretty seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like genuinely afraid to confront her. Like when there's one line I didn't catch for a long time because there's so much going on. And it's played totally seriously. And it was like the first time I heard it in full, I was like, holy shit, that's like this is like a really serious storyline. When the mole is dying,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of funnily dramatic, especially with the way his character was the whole time. And the fact that he's like singing his own dying song, you can almost barely hear it. Have you caught as the mole is dying, Kyle has a hold of him and he says, I can't face my mom alone.
Mm.
That's what he's afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, holy shit.
There's also the part that it comes out where when he finally does confront her and he points out your own son is Canadian.
Yeah. And it's
Which is
how
funny because that joke has been made so many times throughout the show and like looks different than everybody, but the movie doesn't really address it till then.
yeah.
It's like they saved it for that moment.
I love all the all the interactions with the Canadian ambassadors pre-war.
Hmm.
Like they just come to conclusions like, you guys are dicks. uh, but yeah, then there's like, because there's some moments in the South Park movie that are pretty big. Like even though everything does eventually get restored, it feels wild when Kyle has his big confrontational moment with his mom. And usually it's the moment where you like there's a big turning point and everybody like, puts their guns down and everything. And her response is to grab a gun and just give them headshots.
Hmm.
And it's like this movie goes into like really fucking dark places.
Not to mention the fact that before Satan brought all of them back, most of the town was dead.
Yeah, it's like and as far as Kyle's mom going, as far as to kill Terrence and Phillip herself in front of all of the kids.
Hmm.
Let's say hell didn't raise. And everything like how hell this is the places South Park goes. Hell raising is what brought everything back to normal.
Hmm.
If hell didn't raise and her killing Terrence and Phillip is how this story ended, where would the characters end up?
Hmm. But if anybody would have taken that leap and gone that direction, it would have been South Park.
Yeah, this story is so fucked up. Satan had to save the day.
Hmm. Satan, being tired of being treated like a bitch from Saddam Hussein, had to save the day.
Yeah. That's also funny. You know what all the different titles we've seen nowadays, like Inglorious Bastards and all that other stuff, and Kick Ass and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, the original title of this was South Park All Hell Breaks Loose, but the censors didn't like that.
Hmm.
I don't know. Which is really funny, given that's a large portion of the movie. Also, is it's basically them versus the MPAA.
Hmm.
Like that's like a main factor we didn't even talk about this whole time, but it's like a massive portion of the movie. But yeah. So is that, and that's the thing too, is it even reached critical acclaim.
Hmm.
Like it's like this DVD cover in the back is just filled with critical comments, and like it'd be one of those things where you would think, like, I wonder if a lot of critics thought that this movie was going to fail back then,
Hmm.
because it was just known for being like a crude animated show. Like it's almost like the movie kind of gave it like, it's almost like the jumping off point to the widespread acclaim that it has now for being as smart as it is.
Hmm.
Because like with the very first episode being about like aliens anal probing and stuff like that. But
That and the fact that the movie doesn't have any all the current events discussed in the movie are inter-universe.
yeah, but at the same time are recognizable still in certain
Hmm.
ways. Just obviously extremely exaggerated, but still.
Is it all that exaggerated anymore, though?
I was just gonna say you could argue that you could argue that point. Hmm.
I mean, like I said, I am waiting for an episode of South Park if it hasn't happened yet. If anybody was in the South Park world not going to wear a mask, it's Sheila Perflowski.
And then there's the whole thing of as far as like how widespread it is as far as genre goes. Because you could argue it's one of the funniest movies ever made. You'd have to take a lot into account, but just offhand, you could say that, and people probably wouldn't,
Hmm.
try to combat it too much. But whenever I'm asked what my favorite animated movie is or what my favorite musical is, it's not my answer, but it comes up as a possible candidate
Hmm.
for both of those categories. And it's like how that feels very widespread, that you can be one of the funniest movies ever made and possibly one of the best animated and musical movies. One of the critic comments on the back is This is the New York Times, the year's funniest comedy and best movie musical in years. Now, of course, musicals weren't booming in the 90s, but taking that into account also, but still, that's a relatively big statement.
I'm surprised it didn't dominate the musical or comedy category at the Globes.
I can't remember what it did globe-wise, if anything.
Well, I'd imagine song.
I would think so. I can't remember if they had an animated category. The Oscar animated category didn't come along until 2 years later.
Do you think this would have won?
It would have been against Toy Story 2, probably not.
Mm.
Actually, come to think of it, I think Toy Story 2 won the Globe for musical or comedy. So, but before we get going into very long territory, should we bounce on over to the Beavis and Butthead movie?
Yeah, I'm looking at what
it did globe-wise, if anything.
it was nominated for Best Animated Feature at the Annies.
Nice. I'm assuming it lost to Toy Story 2.
Probably.
How funny is it that both these movies come from Paramount, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Like, Paramount was all about getting these off the ground. But kind of going back to the territory we talked about at the beginning of this, the idea of your movie going bigger, if it's going to translate from one screen to the next.
It did nothing at the Globes.
Huh. Not even song, that's surprising.
Yeah, no nominations.
So
when you say that, I think of Warren Beatty's quote that the Golden Globes are fun and the Oscars are business. That means people put their business hat on to nominate Blame Canada.
What's really funny is if you watch the movie in full and the movie got an Oscar nomination for song, you might assume it's the Michael McDonald song during the end credits that's kind of slow,
Mm-hmm.
which is still a funny song, especially coming out of his voice. But I think Blame Canada is a really inspired choice. So.
I think my favorite musical moment for Michael McDonald in a movie is the anger that he gives Paul Rudd in the 40-Year-Old Virgin. Like, I rewatched 40-Year-Old Virgin not too long ago. I still laugh really hard at the line that if I hear Yamo Bimo one more time, I'm going to Yamo burn this place to the ground.
So
he's talking to the guy, and the guy's like, I haven't heard this song in years. And Paul Rudd's like, I haven't heard this song in about 18 minutes.
We also didn't credit Mark Shaman, who co-wrote a lot of the songs with Trey Parker, who deserves a lot of credit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, who I believe was his co-nominee for Blame Canada.
Mm.
But yes, so to move on to Beavis and Butthead, unless you have anything else to add.
Beavis and Butthead also starts with a musical number.
Yes, but even before that, I love how it takes the approach as literal as possible. Like, it almost feels like Mike Judge is making a joke about how do I make these characters bigger.
Mm-hmm.
It literally starts with a Godzilla thing going on. With Beavis breathing fire for some reason.
And then, of course, them getting in a little spat while they're giant.
I love that. I love helicopters getting swatted out of the sky with just comments like, cut it out.
I love the little spats that they have. Like, when they get in the airplane, cut it out, Beavis. I want to sit by the window.
And it happens again on the bus. And then, were you talking about the opening credits?
Mm-hmm.
Which I believe, is that Isaac Hayes? Doing a kind of parody of his own Shaft theme?
It might be.
So if it's not him, it definitely feels like it's somebody doing a parody of him. But I'm thinking it might actually be him. But yeah, that's like what's really great about this, though, that I kind of feel like the joke of it is we have this really, like, it has this big opening credit sequence which follows this big Godzilla-like sequence. And then that's about as theatrical as the movie gets.
Mm-hmm.
Its plot kind of, but as far as like it being physically big, that's about it. It almost feels like that's the joke.
Hmm.
It's like
After
I'm gonna,
after that, as big as it gets, probably as the cast.
yeah. Yeah, because it's basically like he almost lured them in, where it's like, see Beavis and Butthead as bigger than you've ever seen them before. The opening scene, we literally see them bigger than we've ever seen them before. Then we get a big explosive opening credit sequence. Then it's just an episode of the show. They're just digging through the garbage in the next shot.
Not in here.
I feel like that has to be the joke. But remember what happens in between this. In between the Godzilla sequence and the opening credit sequence,
Hmm.
when they discover that the TV's missing. And which I love the fact that Beavis is so out of it that he's still clicking the remote at the wall, thinking something's gonna happen. But do you have anything to say about this scene, about Butthead assessing the situation?
I love his conclusion, and I love his. Would you call it a monologue?
a declaration, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I want to mention
It's like a statement, and then there's intent to do something.
Yeah. Now I wanted to mention something. I wanted to specifically because it's so funny. I want to read something off really quickly. You'll notice on the cover of the DVD that both Siskel and Ebert gave this a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm.
This moment where Butthead assesses the situation of where the TV went,
Mm-hmm.
Ebert devoted a full paragraph to. Would you all like to hear it?
I'd like to hear it.
Okay. Early in Mike Judge's Beavis and Butthead Do America, there is a funny sequence in which their television is stolen. This becomes apparent to Beavis and Butthead after a time because they realize that they are looking at the place where the TV should be and it is not there. As this fact sinks in, they grow restless and disturbed. Butthead tries to reconstruct the crime. And the movie shows a series of shots. Number 1, broken window. Number 2, missing TV. Number 3, footprints leading from the window to where the TV was. Number 4, footprints leading out the open door. Then the movie repeats this series of shots a second time, and then a third time, and then the series is broken up into close-ups for closer study. Eventually, the clues are correctly deciphered. The set is not there because it has been stolen. This sequence is brilliant in the way it illustrates the mental capabilities of Beavis and Butthead, who between them have the IQ of a cork. Ebert felt that moment was so brilliant it was worthy of a full paragraph, and I completely agree. And once again, this is before the movies even started. So, and
That's
then,
the thing too with this movie. We get to the plot pretty early.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing too, where we're talking about the plot, where it's another way it kind of feels bigger than a usual episode is the fact that it's basically in its own way, it's a road trip movie.
Mm-hmm.
When it's usually just kind of, if they even leave the house, they're just wandering around town,
Mm-hmm.
like hanging out inside the convenience store, or
They
working
go to
at
the
Burger
school.
World. Yeah, we talk about this. Let's not forget they are actually employed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the movie never brings up Burger World except during the hallucination, but I mean, they have jobs at least.
And they've obviously skipped school to search for the TV because when they go to the school, they're students.
Yeah. I believe Beavis' exact line is, "Damn it, I don't want to go to school. What are we doing? Why did we come here?"
But it's funny
So,
too that in their mind they remembered, oh yeah, there's a TV here.
yeah. It's supposed to be in the AV room. How Beavis just takes responsibility there. Why isn't it in the AV room? That's where it's supposed to be. We're leaving. So you mentioned
I believe when the principal expels them, Butthead's response is just cool.
Something else you mentioned about it being big is the cast list. So should we go into that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've got Bruce Willis and Demi Moore, obviously. And it's like we were talking about, it is interesting how even though the movie doesn't feel as theatrical as its opening moments, when we say there's names in it, there's names in it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are smaller. Some of them are kind of obscure, at least for both the time and the Beavis and Butthead audience.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things that I didn't know for a long time, and my hand to this, do you know who the bus driver is?
I looked it up, but I don't remember.
The bus driver, the whole time, that eventually attacks Beavis and says, "All right, that's it, numbnuts."
Mm-hmm.
Richard Linklater. the Richard Linklater. And this is 1996 Richard Linklater. He'd only had like Slacker and Dazed and Confused as far as stuff that everybody knew.
Mm-hmm.
He had smaller things here and there, but it's like, how random is that? I don't.
And let's not forget the head of the ATF is played by, after several movies where he's done it, do we consider him a master of playing the straight man in a funny situation?
He's got to be up there.
Yeah. For the uninitiated, we're talking about Robert Stack. And my three examples are this, Airplane, and Basketball.
Yeah. See, I always forget about Airplane right away because my mind immediately goes to like Lloyd Bridges first, besides Leslie Nielsen. It's like I keep forgetting Robert Stack is also there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's very crucial also.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the interactions.
I think you forget an Airplane though, because Lloyd Bridges gets all the showy jokes.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Mm-hmm. Like what was the one line? I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Yeah. And these interactions he has with Bork, who is Greg Kinnear.
Mm-hmm. Greg Kinnear right before his Oscar nomination.
Yeah, including Richard Linklater. There are 3 voices in this movie that are Oscar nominees and 1 winner.
Mm-hmm.
We also have, because as far as the Oscar winner in this cast, that would be Cloris Leachman,
mm-hmm.
as the old woman that just keeps showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And her interactions with Beavis are some of my favorite parts of the movie. Okay, do you have a favorite old lady character moment in this movie? Because I do.
What do you got?
When she, I don't know if I can say it. Okay, without laughing. When she mistakenly introduces them as Travis and Bob. I know there's so many things that character does, but
my favorite is, I love some of Beavis's response amongst his mutterings. Like when in the bus, when she accidentally gives him the energy pills, and she's like, "Did that say Xanax?" And he just mumbles, "Yeah, probably."
I also love, there's so much wordplay in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is hardly wordplay, it's just them being idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Like how they mishear slots as sluts. And it's the idea, what makes it so funny is hearing other characters as Beavis and Butthead hear them.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they see her on the bus and they're talking about, scoring, and she says, "I took a beating," and she does like that moan sound.
And I think Butthead's response is just, "Whoa." I also love when she shows back up on that bus, and Beavis' response is, "Hey, Butthead, look, it's that slut from the play."
I think that's the thing, too, is we were talking about how smart and clever the jokes are.
I've often wondered if that line came from her "I took a beating" line.
Is we were talking about how smart and clever the jokes are in the South Park movie, and how they're like kind of layered. And it's like we can still equally appreciate just the simplicity of why the lines of Beavis and Butthead are funny.
It's like South Park has all that clever writing, and then there's one point where Butthead just tells a flight attendant, "I got a beer. Want some?"
That's the thing, is the characters are so funny. Almost anything they say can be funny, even if it's just them speaking normally.
I love when they're saying all the town names that they drive by.
Once again, okay, this is a totally different scenario now, but it's the same thing. Just as we were laughing at stuff we felt like we shouldn't be in the South Park movie because it's offensive, we're laughing at stuff we feel like we shouldn't be in the Beavis and Butthead movie because it's so fucking lowbrow, but it's still hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Like when they're in the at the Petrified Forest Museum and they're looking in the glass case and Butthead just laughs and says wood.
Yeah. Is it the whole, like, if you want to, like, I almost just want to take it at surface level and just say, like, that's just funny in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to take it from, like, a more analytical perspective, it is the kind of thing where it's like, is it funny because we know these simple things that are hilarious are just their whole identity?
I have to go out on a limb. I remember growing up, I'm going to the damn scene now. I remember growing up, Dad loved the line in Vegas Vacation when Uncle Eddie would say, "Where can I get some damn bait?"
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite is when Beavis says, "Is this like goddamn?"
Yeah, because this was the year before Vegas Vacation, and those scenes are so similar.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know if that was, because when there's only a year difference, there's still the chance for coincidence. But it's like, it does make you wonder. It's like we just happen to have two comedies in a row that had a Hoover Dam tour.
where the word damn comes into a joke.
Yeah.
A word joke.
And disaster happens out of control.
Beavis and Buttheads, though, is a lot more drastic.
Yeah. Oh my God, the poor Anderson. Through this whole thing.
And I love at the end of the movie being labeled the masterminds.
Because the thing is what you have to think about the whole time, every time we see them. One of the first things he says in the movie is, obviously they're older and retired.
Mm-hmm.
This is the trip they've been planning their whole lives. Which makes every time it fucks up in some way funnier than the last.
I love Tom Anderson's reactions to some things too. Like, I think one of my favorites is when he sees the camper shaking, which is hilarious alone that the camper is shaking. But he goes in, and off screen, inside the camper, we just hear, "Put your damn pants on."
I do love that moment right before Beavis goes into the camper. It's kind of a similar thing of seeing the TV stolen thing, where you put, like, it's somebody like doing the math as they look at different things. And I love the imagery of cutting to the Washington Monument when he makes his Boeing sound. It's like in that moment kind of shows us how chaotic Beavis's mind is.
Mm-hmm. That's like you brought up earlier, the "that's it, numbnut" scene. Like, it's such a big deal to Beavis that they're leaving. And it's done so dramatically. Like, it even shows Cloris Leachman's husband, and he's just like, "It's time to go, son."
Which is also hilarious because he was so content when they were getting on the bus. He's like humming to himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wait, why are we back on the bus? There's something else I want to mention about the plot. It's kind of funny the more you think about it. The fact that they've been accidentally hired to kill somebody. Is this one of the most high profile, like, one character sending people to kill another character type of thing? They have a limo waiting for them. They get escorted out by security as soon as they get there for wreaking havoc. They didn't even realize they were guests. They thought they were just there wreaking havoc.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they were escorted out of a casino for dancing.
and apparently detained all night because we see the sunrise before they're taken to their room, and he's like, sorry, we didn't know you were registered guests.
I also love, it's such a small moment, but I love how tunnel vision they are through the movie too. Like when they go in to Muddy, that's his name. They go into Muddy's room, and the first thing they do is just turn and start watching TV.
And it's just on a blank screen. Yes, somehow Beavis is really into it. I remember one of our favorite lines growing up was when Muddy says you're late, but it says, really? Did we miss Baywatch? as if Muddy's planning some viewing party. Mm. Mm.
I love the fact that the plot gets going because they're so distracted by the TV, they're only half paying attention.
Yeah. and the prospect of scoring.
Yeah. Just the simple fact that a certain choice of words was used that set the plot in motion.
And there's so many of those things through the whole movie. These little things that set the plot in different directions and branching off.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that Beavis is unlucky enough to be on a plane the first time in the movie when he turns into Cornholio,
Mm-hmm.
which means for the rest of the movie, Cornholio is identified as a terror. Like we laugh when they're just in the cockpit and Beavis as Cornholio breaks through the door. And it's like right in that moment, Cornholio is considered a terrorist the rest of the movie.
I love that there's so much of that going on too. There's even an instance where Butthead starts to say something and he's cut off.
Yeah.
They tell him to get out of the cockpit and he just says, "You said," and he gets cut off. And I'm pretty sure this is a show thing too, but I love how they can take any phrase and make it dirty. It sounds like such a juvenile joke, but it's hilarious that the hippie teacher gives the entire speech that ends with "entertain us," and they took anus out of it.
So you cut off there to me. I heard about the hippie teacher, but I didn't hear the second part.
Oh, the fact that the hippie teacher gives this whole big spiel that ends with the phrase "entertain us," and all they got out of all of that was anus.
You know what it reminds me of?
Hmm.
Is these little childish jokes that shouldn't work, but they do just because they work. They work in their simplicity. Is Michael Scott's "That's What She Said" thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much that took off when it's such a juvenile joke, but it's funny every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just somehow it is. And then we also we get a number of beats in here. It feels like we've seen before, like when they eventually get a ride with nuns.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a couple of those instances feel like they came later, like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back or Ready to Rumble or something like that.
But did
It feels
Beavis
like
and Butthead have one of the funniest consequences, we'll call it, of that happening?
that whole church scene is just gold. That's even as a kid and into adulthood, that's always been one of the funniest scenes in the movie to me.
One thing also that I love is it's easier to do, I think, in a live action movie, but to get little reaction shots, like minute ones that are really funny, the one that I think of is, have you ever noticed the very quick shot when they're in the desert with the guys that they think might be their dads? Well, they don't think it. We think it. They don't have a fucking clue. But Butthead's dad farts and it cuts back briefly to them and their hair is like flying back with the
I'm about to make. If you don't know, I'm about to make that funnier.
Hmm.
Another big name in this movie
Hmm.
is Butthead's dad.
Hmm.
Do you know who that is?
Mm-mm.
It's obvious when you know.
Hmm.
Butthead's dad, the guy that says, "We were in this toilet called Highland, and there were some sluts there."
Mm-hmm.
That's Letterman. You can now that you know, you can tell, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we also didn't mention somebody that shows up a few times.
Hmm.
Eric Bogosian is a few characters.
Oh yeah.
And you can tell every time because his voice is very recognizable.
Hmm. Christ, there's a whole movie made about the fact that he has a distinct voice.
Yeah. Then we get, yeah, like you're talking about, we get the whole desert sequence where it basically turns into Jerry, the Gus Van Sant movie.
Hmm.
And it turns into Jerry 7 years before Jerry came out.
And
And then we get,
I love in the desert that they have no concept of anything. Like they've been walking in the desert forever. And Beavis is like, how much further Butthead's is the Butthead's response is another 5 minutes or so.
there's another great probably with Butthead, are we gonna die? Probably. And then we get a big callback to the show, because you can watch the movie as is, thinking about the show, and the one thing you'll say is, "This is great, but I missed the music videos."
Hmm.
So they just made a fucking music video in the middle of the movie.
If I
Completely
remember
random.
correctly, I believe Rob Zombie was the artist for it.
Yeah, you can tell.
Hmm.
That's his song too. That's a wicked fucking song. I still sometimes listen to it by itself.
Hmm.
It's got a crazy name too. It's what is it? Rat Things, Suicide Tanks, and Cannibal Girls is the
Hmm.
full title of the song. uh, and then yeah, like I said, in this big thing is like the only reference we get to Burger World.
Hmm.
It was like a couple of demonic images of them in their Burger World outfits for some reason. And then yes, eventually, somehow, some way, we end up at the White House.
Wait a minute.
Well, of course we do, because
There's
it's
one. Wait, before we leave the desert, there's one thing that cracks me up that I have to bring up. I love when Butthead mentions that his life is flashing before his eyes, and it's just them sitting on that couch laughing at different ages.
Beavis is good too, where he's the sperm that just has Beavis's face. Once again,
I also love that Butthead's response to that was, "My life ruled."
That's the thing. That's the thing. The jokes are so simple.
Mhm.
There's like hardly any brains behind these jokes, but they just work. And
It's a
I think
very, when you get down to brass tacks with it, it's a very stupid movie, but it's brilliant.
is it okay? Is it a stupid movie, or is it a movie about stupidity?
I think that might be more it.
There we go. But yeah, I say somehow, some way we get to the White House, but like, yeah, it's the story the whole time they're on their way to Washington D.C.
Hmm.
And this was established very early, so it was inevitable. So yes, we have an animated Clinton show up in both movies we've talked about.
Wait a minute. Before we do that, we need to go back and talk about how the climax ends. The climax literally ends with the thing that Robert Stack's looking for falling in Butthead's hand, and just the simple fact of him going, "Here you go."
And I think the only reason that didn't go off and kill all of them was because it hit his hair first.
Mhm. I also love in that scene where he gets cavity searched and they open the van and he's just sitting there all disheveled and his response is just, "Did I just score?"
Yeah. When we were talking about Robert Stack, we didn't even bring up the fact that his really weird obsession with cavity surgeons.
Hmm.
Isn't there even a moment where Bohr kind of stops him and says, "You mean the witness? Why?" And he's totally, much like any other Robert Stack, like animation does not stop this at all. Just like any other Robert Stack character, he is totally straight faced.
Hmm.
Oh. So,
I love too. You were talking about Clinton in the White House. I love when it's spun around and the reveal is that it's Clinton that wants to see them because Robert Stack tells them, there's somebody special that wants to meet you. And we get that cut back to them and they just have this look on their face. like they're not sure who he is, why he's there.
I would almost think it's almost like shock, like they do know who he is, but it's like, it's interesting that that would be such a big deal to them.
Hmm. But I mean, they watch a lot of TV, so they've probably seen him on TV.
They worship him because the whole scandal was that he scored.
Yeah. Even though I'm pretty sure that happened 2 years later.
I was gonna say, there's no way it wouldn't have been referenced if it had already happened.
Hmm.
And then, of
You were
course,
talking about another juvenile joke in the movie that really works. It's when they find the jack in the trunk and they're jacking the trunk open, and Butthead just says, "I'm jacking off."
that whole scene, starting with that line to Beavis being pushed out of the trunk, it's. I don't know why I also love that shot with it. The shot that makes Tom Anderson crash when Beavis is just like kind of twitching in the road. Oh. So,
And I love that Butthead finds it funny until they hit a bump and then off he goes. And the way he like smacks off that first car.
because if that didn't happen, how far distance were they gonna get? And would they have ever found each other again? But well, no, Butthead wouldn't have mattered because Muddy probably would have killed him. But it's but then we kind of beautifully come full circle where nothing. It reminds me a lot of the ending of Dumb and Dumber, where they're just right back where they started. They're still just as dumb, but at least they find some contentment in either each other or the TV or Anderson's tool shed.
And part of the comedy is they don't grow any as characters.
That's gotta be one of the best last lines ever is, hey, doesn't Tom Anderson live on this street? I just gotta stop by his tool shed for a second. Fade out. Oh God. So anything else about this movie?
I think we covered it.
So I think it's clear which one is like the objectively better one, like as far as writing goes, as far as cleverness goes, as far as like composition of the songs and stuff like that. But like I said, it's appreciating. That's the thing too, though, is there's a lot of stupid humor in South Park also. So we're not like on entirely two different planets here, but it's clear the different kinds of humor we're looking at. And it's more, I do think it's interesting how with smart comedy, you can like analyze what makes it funny. Because like it's almost like an equation of why something's funny. But when you're laughing at something like Beavis and Butthead that's stupid funny, you're kind of baffled as to the science of why you think it's funny. You just do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but obviously I think the South Park movie is the best of its kind in a number of genres. But and I almost think actually the South Park movie goes into such dark places sometimes that the Beavis and Butthead movie is a lot easier to go back to.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it was just like a normal day or whatever, and I was gonna choose between the two, there's a good chance I'd go for the Beavis and Butthead movie pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the South Park movie is more of like a satisfying experience, I guess, because it does so much and pushes the envelope so much, but like always hits the mark somehow. Even when you feel like it shouldn't be, it still is.
Mm-hmm. Where Beavis and Butthead is a great movie to just put on and just watch and just laugh at stupid shit.
Like I said, the fact that Mike Judge is doing it knowingly does make it smart in its own way, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So is that it?
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. I'm getting ready to shoot a couple of other things that are probably going to go up before this, but this will be like in the next day. This will be up. So yeah, and I'll have just two more, I think. No, three more. Horror themed videos to go up after this, but they're bigger. That's why they're taking so long. So yeah, and then we'll just go from there. And there's new stuff coming out that'll be reviewed also. So like the stuff that was like on demand, the stuff that was in theaters when they tried to open them again that I didn't go to, are starting to come out on demand. So I'll be catching up with those.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what's going on for now. And I talked to Owen about doing another awards video soon. Now that more contenders are coming to light, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the kind of thing we're looking at. So I think if you don't have anything else to add, that might be it.
I think that's it.
All right.